houseoffriends@gmail.com.
Early in 1968, Earl Blackwell of Hillsborough and 8 colleagues who were dubbed the Nasty Nine by reporters clashed with the Hearns administration on capital improvements and patronage agency budgets, set the stage for an ever-widening gulf between Blackwell's group and the Hearns administration. At the time the Democrats chose Earl Blackwell their candidate for president pro tem, he was 45 years old and he lived in Hillsborough. His ancestors had been among the early settlers of the area. 4 years earlier, Governor Hearns had chosen him as the administration candidate for pro tem, but at that time the old guard in the Senate blocked the election by 1 vote. In 1967, he'd given a hint of things to come when he was named acting pro tem while Senator John Joint was ill. He promptly fired the Senate Accounts Committee. He ran for lieutenant governor in 1968, but he withdrew when financial support didn't materialize, and observers speculated his break with the Hearns administration stemmed at least partly from that because Hearns backed William Morris of Kansas City, the eventual winner. But Blackwell quickly neutralized Morris's influence. Shortly after Hearns and Morris were inaugurated, the 1969 legislative session began with Blackwell formally elected president pro tem, the most powerful position in the Senate, and one of the first things he did was change the rules so he could remove Morris as presiding officer whenever he wanted to, rule on all parliamentary motions, and hold membership on all committees. Throughout his career as head of the Senate, Blackwell maintained he was just trying to keep it separate from the executive branch, was trying to keep the governor from dominating the Senate as he did the House. At one time, Governor Hearns referred to Blackwell as the most powerful man in state government, more powerful than the governor himself. He fought administration attempts to increase individual and corporate taxes, and when they finally were passed, he circulated a petition statewide forcing a vote in April of 1970 that overturned it. That might have been Blackwell's biggest victory. His faction took over the Legislative Fiscal Affairs Committee to the anguish of House members. The Young Turks from the Senate ousted the committee chairman, House Appropriations Leader Lucky Cantrell of Overland, and installed St. Anne Senator Robert Young in his place. But during the summer, opposition to his tactics grew, and when a special session was called in the fall of 1969, an effort was made to oust him as pro tem. Kansas City freshman Senator Don Manford moved for the ouster, claiming confusion over Blackwell's recent marriage, involving whether there had been a previous divorce, and whether Blackwell had established residence in another state, Nevada, created a situation requiring action to restore the Senate's integrity. The move failed by 2 votes. In October of 1969, the Democrats had another caucus. They voted 15-8 to replace Blackwell with J.F. Patterson of Caruthersville. Blackwell promised to go down fighting, refused to resign, and that January Blackwell held off repeated and concerted attacks to oust him as president pro tem for 1/10 day. But on the second day, he realized the string had run out, and he wasn't even present when the Senate voted 22-10 to change the rules and strip him of the job as president pro tem. He became just another senator, later admitting that perhaps he had stepped on more toes than any other president pro tem. Maybe I've rocked the boat more, maybe I've torn up more playhouses, he said, but he would have done nothing different. Only time is able to put the stamp on those 14 months as history, or whether it's just those sometimes frantic workings of state government, especially the state Senate. 14 months that started the day the Democrats named Earl Blackwell the man they wanted to lead them in the Senate on this date, 14th of November, 1968.
Fed nominee Janet Yellen supplies the tea leaves to read in advance.
Marketplace Morning Report is produced in association with the University of Southern California.
From 8 p.m. in New York, I'm David Brancaccio. Federal Reserve nominee Janet Yellen starts the confirmation process in front of the Senate Banking Committee in a few hours. The text of her prepared remarks is already out, and there are 4 key words in it. The Fed has, Yellen will say, more work to do. That might mean the Fed has more stimulus to do, and that's rallying stock markets today around the world. This morning, Yellen will also talk about openness at America's central bank. Marketplace's Adrienne Hill has more on that.
Janet Yellen wants a more transparent Fed. In a speech at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business last year, she touted good communication.
Indeed, I hope that one of the legacies of this difficult period is a permanent advance in Federal Reserve transparency.
But what exactly she means by that word transparency is maybe not so clear to us regular folks or to our congressional representatives.
When Janet Yellen talks about transparency, she's talking about the Fed being much more clear about how it will act in the future.
Sarah Binder is a political science professor at George Washington University.
When members of Congress talk about transparency in the Fed, they mean something completely different.
They mean the inner workings of the Fed, the sausage factory tour, something Binder says that Yellen and Fed chairs past are far less interested in giving. Too much transparency can mean too little independence. I'm Adrienne Hill for Marketplace.
I have some numbers here. Dow and S&P futures are up this morning so far, but the NASDAQ future is down. The FT 100 in London is up about 0.8%. Shares in the data networking company Cisco Systems are down about 11% in pre-market trading. The company expects sales will drop 10% this quarter, in part because Chinese customers are leery about buying American equipment after revelations of widespread spying by the American National Security Agency. In a couple of minutes, Walmart will say how much profit it made last quarter and perhaps offer some guidance about its prospects during the shopping season that is now upon us. The National Retail Federation projects that the average American shopper will spend $737.95 on holiday shopping. That's down 2% from last year. Gigi Duban has more.
Retailers are using plenty of tricks to snap consumers out of their Thanksgiving food comas.
Some that they've done before, but this year it's on steroids.
That's Wendy Liebman, CEO of WSL Strategic Retail. Stores like Lowe's and Macy's are publishing sneak peeks at holiday deals online. Walmart's opening at 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving. And many Old Navy stores open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. that day. Staggering the chaos makes for better crowd control, says Marshall Cohen, a retail analyst with the NPD Group.
So retailers are offering up the option for the consumer to be able to plan out where they're going to be on what day, at what time, seeking what product at what price.
Walmart is posting store maps online, directing shoppers to popular items. But Cohen adds, crowds are good for retailers. Otherwise, shoppers assume the good deals must be somewhere else. I'm Gigi Duban for Marketplace.
Venezuela has a terrible inflation problem. Consumer prices jumped 54% last month alone. Venezuelan President Maduro blames what he calls hoarding and speculation for this, and the steps he's taking in response are dramatic, you might say. Regular Marketplace contributor Enrique Acevedo has been following this. He's the anchorman and reporter at Univision. Enrique, good morning.
Good morning, David.
Well, let me get this straight. There's a chain in Venezuela called DACA. It's sort of like, think of it as like Best Buy. And he sent in the forces to be sure that prices came down?
Well, instead of using monetary policies to combat inflation, he says he's going to prohibit it. And he's calling the military and police forces to basically occupy stores in industries like textiles or toys, slicing the prices 70, 80% off so people can get anything from plasma TVs to washing machines.
And people are doing what you and I would do. I mean, if someone slashes the prices down at the store, you'd probably line up.
As soon as the announcement came, they rushed into these stores, even with the police forces outside. There was chaos, of course, looting, and it's a natural reaction if you say you're going to slash off prices 60, 70% off in an economy that's struggling to get anything from flour to milk. People thought it was Christmas in November, basically.
Now, a central part of the underlying problem here there are strict foreign exchange controls in Venezuela. The currency, the bolivar, officially is 6.3 to the dollar, but I understand there's a flourishing black market for dollars, and the prices in some of the stores are kind of geared to the black market price.
Well, yeah, the country, which devalued the bolivar by 32% in February, has been unable to arrest that decline, even on the black market. So this is at the center of what's going on in Venezuela, this currency exchange and the currency policy in Venezuela, and the black market that controls it.
To what extent is this politics, do you think, Enrique? I understand there are elections for mayors across Venezuela in less than a month.
I think they use the economy, they use conflict to gain political advantage at the polls. And the opposition in Venezuela has denounced this. I think it's very political. If I had to say, I would say it's 100% political.
All right. Well, the president calls this an economic offensive against speculators. Enrique Acevedo, Univision journalist and anchorman, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
And yesterday we talked to art critic Blake Gopnik about the impending Sotheby's auction of Andy Warhol's silver car crash double disaster. The higher the price, the better the piece, Blake suggested to us. By that measure, it is a very fine picture. Last night, it went for $105 million, the most for a Warhol and the second highest ever for a contemporary work. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report on APM, American Public Media.
Have you purchased illegal drugs in the last 2 years?
Yes, I have.
Thank you.
I sincerely apologize. I understand the embarrassment I caused every member of this council. I understand the embarrassment that I've caused every resident in the city. I'm humiliated by it. But I cannot change the past, Councillor Thompson. All I can do is move on, and that's what I'm doing. So,
have you ever smoked marijuana? Have you ever smoked marijuana?
Of the motion.
Hold it. Have you ever smoked marijuana? It's a question. It's simple. A yes or a no. Have you smoked marijuana?
Point of privilege, Madam. Okay.
The answer, I guess, is yes.
Yeah, they don't want to be truthful.
Obamacare's low numbers.
Causing a huge political problem for Democrats.
U.S. carrier to help typhoon victims.
It is an enormous job we have ahead of us.
Flight fright.
Everybody on that plane thought that we were all going to die.
Good morning. I'm Steve Kathan with the CBS World News Roundup. The critics of Obamacare have new ammunition. The administration's own enrollment numbers. Just over 106,000 so far. A majority of those through state websites. We begin this morning with CBS's Peter Mayer at the White House.
And, Steve, this first sign-up count is far short of White House expectations. It's just part of the administration's problems in this bumpy Obamacare rollout. Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius optimistically predicted sign-up trends would improve.
We can reasonably expect that these numbers will grow substantially over the next 5 months.
But that, of course, will require a fully functioning healthcare.gov website. The White House still hopes it'll be fixed by the end of this month. On another major front, the president will soon propose potential help for people who have received coverage cancellation notices. Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough meets with anxious Senate Democrats on that and other issues today. CBS's Bob Fuss has more on the president's angry congressional allies.
Democrats in Congress who've defended the health reform law for years against unending Republican attacks are getting very nervous. Some Senate Democrats are signing on to proposals to delay minimum requirements for health insurance plans. And House Democrats held a raucous meeting with White House aides on that same issue, demanding something be done quickly to deal with the millions of people with individual health insurance whose policies are being canceled. Bob Fuzz, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
2 Secret Service supervisors attached to the president's detail are under investigation. One allegedly sent suggestive emails to a female co-worker. Sources say the other tried to re-enter a woman's hotel room looking to retrieve a bullet he'd left behind after an earlier visit.
He's been transferred to the intelligence division off the president's detail. And right now they're looking into whether this was misconduct or whether this was just embarrassing.
CBS's John Miller says the other officer has been transferred too. Now to the Philippines. The American carrier George Washington is on the scene now. Marine Colonel John Peck says the mission is to get supplies into typhoon victims by air.
The roads are impassable for miles because you have debris, trees strewn all over the landscape.
Chris Weeks says his aid group World Vision's been able to get relief bags to hundreds on one hard-hit island.
It's got 15 kilos of rice, also a huge bottle of water, load of biscuits, beans for cooking, tins of sardines, and also some really basic hygiene stuff.
CBS's Seth Doan has more on the effort to help the sick and injured.
Tacloban's government-run hospital is on life support. Dr. Lori Roitas told us they normally see 100 patients a day. Since the typhoon, that number has soared to 1,000.
We don't have electricity, we don't have water, and of course food. And then we have some candles.
You're doing hospital work by candlelight?
Yes, sir.
Tacloban is beginning to bury some of the thousands of people who've died. There was a ceremony today just outside the city at a mass grave. But just a couple of hours ago, right on this hillside where I'm standing, more bodies were found. So the grim story certainly continues.
Back here at home, there's an investigation at California's Camp Pendleton after the deaths of 4 Marines yesterday. Base spokesman Jeff Nyhart says they were trying to clear unexploded ordnance.
They were conducting maintenance in the impact area, clearing debris or, placing targets.
The deaths come 8 months after a mortar blast